October 1347. 12 Genoese merchant galleys fled the besieged port of Caffa, crossing the Black Sea to dock in Messina, Sicily. But when the Sicilian locals gathered on the piers to greet the fleet, they were met with a horrific sight. Most of the sailors were already dead. Those still breathing were delirious, covered in black boils and spitting blood.
Send them back to sea! Cast them out before he takes the city! It is already ashore! Look at the docks, it is too late!
The ships had carried a silent, invisible passenger ashore. Yersinia pestis, a lethal bacteria hosted by fleas, which lived on the black rats that infested the ships in the crowded, unsanitary streets of medieval Europe. The spark had caught, and the continent was about to burn. From the coast, the contagion spread with terrifying, unnatural speed. It followed the trade routes, striking Italy, piercing the heart of France, crossing the English Channel, and sweeping into Germany and Russia. No wall could keep it out. No wealth could buy safety. From the poorest peasant in a thatched hovel to the highest noble in a stone castle, all were equal before the pestilence. The disease was uniquely horrifying. It became known as the Bubonic Plague, named for the buboes, agonizing, dark, egg-sized swellings that ruptured in the groin, armpits, and neck. For many, a high fever and a sudden cough were the only warnings. Within 3 days of the first symptoms, the body succumbed to internal bleeding and organ failure. Humanity completely fractured under the weight of the crisis. Families abandoned one another. Parents fled from their sick children. Fields lay fallow as crops rotted in the dirt. Whole villages were erased from the map, leaving behind empty ghost towns where the only sound was the wind. The living were no longer numerous enough to bury the dead, and massive mass graves became the final resting places for millions. In an era centuries before the discovery of microscopes or germ theory, people were utterly blind to what was killing them. They looked to the stars, blaming alignment of the planets, or concluded that the end of days had arrived, that the plague was the literal wrath of an angry God punishing a sinful world. Desperation bred madness. Bands of religious zealots, known as flagellants, marched from town to town. Covered in hoods, they sang somber hymns and publicly whipped themselves with iron-tipped cords. Elsewhere, fear turned into violent paranoia as communities sought scapegoats, turning on outsiders and destroying marginalized populations in waves of hysterical violence. The medical community of the 14th century was utterly powerless. Doctors relied on the theory of miasma, the belief that the disease was carried by foul, corrupted air. They donned eerie leather beak masks stuffed with dried flowers, camphor, and sweet herbs to filter the air. They tried bloodletting, burning aromatic woods, and applying exotic herbs to the boils. But every treatment failed. The world was burning itself alive in a desperate, futile attempt to stay safe. By the time the initial, catastrophic wave finally receded in 1353, the geopolitical landscape of the Earth had changed forever. The Black Death had claimed up to 60% of Europe's population. In less than a decade, an estimated 75 to 200 million lives vanished globally. Yet, as the smoke cleared, an unexpected transformation began. The unimaginable loss of life completely shattered the foundations of medieval feudalism. Because there was a severe shortage of labor, the surviving peasants suddenly held immense leverage. They stood tall, demanding higher wages, lower rents, and greater personal freedom from a desperate landlord class. The rigid social hierarchy that had locked generations into poverty was broken. The psychological trauma also forced a profound shift in human thought. Having watched the old institutions fail to stop the apocalypse, humanity began to question ancient dogmas. It sparked a fierce new reliance on empirical observation, public health regulations, and actual scientific inquiry. Out of the ash and despair of the medieval world's darkest hour, the seeds of modern medicine, human rights, and the Renaissance were planted. The plague had destroyed an old world, but in doing so, it forced the creation of our own.